Hello, it's Dr. Tiffany, your resident homeschool champion, and I am bringing you thoughts of a homeschool mom in the form of a 5-day series that I'm talking with you about this week called Dispelling the 5 Common Myths About Homeschooling. So if you caught my video yesterday, you would note that we discussed that the first myth, we dispelled that first myth, which is that homeschooling is unpopular. So we just knocked that out of the park, and we talked about the fact that homeschooling is for everyone. If you have a willingness to teach your child and to do so in an alternative fashion, then homeschooling is open for you to research and to decide if that's something that you would like to pursue. There are no guidelines that are keeping you from pursuing homeschooling if you want to. There's no education status or level that you have to meet in order to do so. There's nothing barring you from entering into a homeschooling situation for your family if you want to. So we really knocked that out of the park. We also talked about where homeschooling originated from, and we actually did a little talk about one type of homeschooling, and later on this week we're going to go into more detail about the different ways that you can homeschool your child. So I hope you'll stick with me for the entire week. But we went ahead and got rid of myth number 1, so we now know that it is not true that homeschooling is unpopular. So today we want to jump into myth number 2. And myth number 2 is that homeschooling is hard to begin. Now let me say, I do understand when people say this, because if you look at it from one angle, that might be true. However, I call this a myth because I feel like if you look at this from a different angle and different perspective, then several of the reasons that I'm going to talk to you about as to why people say that it's hard to begin, I feel like you can address those quite easily and look at them differently, and then you'll see that it's not that it's hard to begin. They're just a different focus that you need to give to those areas. So one of the first reasons why people say that homeschooling is hard to begin is that we don't really see ourselves as teachers. We see ourselves as, with your child, you see yourself as their parent. You're nurturing them, you're making sure they have some food to eat, clothing on their back, and you are monitoring and caring for them, but you don't really consider yourself a teacher unless you have the profession of a teacher. You're teaching elementary, middle school, high school, college level. Maybe you're an online instructor. Maybe you're teaching Sunday school or Bible study at your church, but you have the function, that teacher function, that is tangible for you. And so in those cases, you may see yourself as, okay, yes, I am a teacher and I can teach. But the average person is not doing that every day if that's not their profession, or if that's not something that they are doing, for their church or community. So it's difficult to see yourself as a teacher. But what you have to understand is that as a parent, you are your child's first teacher, and you are teaching them even when you don't know that you are. You're teaching them at every step of the way. You're teaching them colors immediately. You're talking about objects, animals, their left from their right. You're teaching them about what good things and bad things to do, good choices and bad choices. You're teaching them about how to be courteous and polite. So each time that you're instilling in them some other factor or quality or something, you are teaching. So you need to, first of all, look at yourself as what you are, your child's first teacher. And so I think that is one of the biggest barriers, is saying, how can I do this? And, I'm not a teacher, but you actually are. You are your child's first teacher, and they look to you first to understand concepts and things that they're not quite sure about. One of the things that my mother always said to me is that she loved the way that my daughter would look to me for assurance, or look to me to say, is this right? Is this how this works? Or things like that, because she said it showed that she knew where to go for assistance or for help. She went to myself and her father. She went to her parents, so myself and my husband, we tried to make sure that she understood, that we are there to guide you and to nurture you, and we took on that teacher role quite well. Although for myself personally, I was in the same boat. I didn't think of myself as a teacher when I started considering homeschooling. I thought the same thing. How am I going to do this? But when I realized, what? I am her teacher. I've been teaching her for years. I just wasn't thinking of myself in that way, because you think of it as parenting, not teaching. So that's the first thing. You are your child's first teacher. You're capable, you're equipped to do so. Okay. And so that's one of the first things that people say, this is difficult because, how am I going to teach? You can do it. You've been doing it. It's just, you will have to, in homeschooling, you're going to begin to do it in a slightly different way, because now you will be, depending on how you decide to teach, if you decide to use a formal curriculum, or if you decide to build out your own curriculum with different separate pieces, there's going to be some things that you're being guided through to teach your child, but you're equipped to do so. The second reason why people think that homeschooling is hard to begin is because there are a lot of resources out there to assist you with homeschooling. There are hard copy curriculums. There are online curriculums where there's absolutely no paper whatsoever. Everything's online. There are individual piece curriculums for different subject matter and different areas that you can actually put together your own curriculum for the year without using a prepackaged form. So there's lots of stuff out there. So the issue is that most people, even though we like choices, we really want someone to tell us what's the best thing. We want someone to help us know what's best, what works best. And so why people feel like homeschooling is hard to begin is because really no one can tell you what is best. You have to decide what's best for your family. You have to decide if your teaching style matches having a prepackaged curriculum that you follow from A, B, C, D, E all the way to Z. You have to decide if you would rather pull pieces together because you want a more fluid learning environment, because that's what works better for your child. You have to make that decision. And so sometimes parents feel like that's a little hard because in the past, what you've been doing is you've just been supporting the educational process for your child. You've just been in support of it because your child's already in elementary or junior high or even high school, and you've been sending them to a school where they are learning, and then you're just supporting that. So sometimes that's difficult then to think, okay, no, I'm not supporting any longer. I am actually now the primary facilitator of this educational process. And so that can seem quite difficult, but I ask you to look at it from the other angle, and to look at it as an opportunity to really create for your child a customized educational environment where they will flourish and they will grow and they will thrive. And so I ask you to look at it from that side, as opposed to saying, oh my gosh, there's so many options, I don't know which one I'm going to choose, oh my goodness. But to take the opportunity to do the research, to take the time to see what works and to test things out. My daughter is 5 years old, and we are in a kindergarten curriculum. And I learned very early on that my type A personality really didn't match with a prepackaged curriculum. I really wanted to have more hands-on, to where I could make changes and do things as I needed to what I felt like was best for her. And so I tried a prepackaged curriculum to begin, and it just didn't work for me. I liked some of the pieces, but then I wanted to add or, take away or expand, so I've allowed myself to do that, and I've allowed for us to be able to explore. And when I say us, I mean both of us, for her to explore and for her to say what she likes and what she doesn't like, and for me to be able to look at what works for me and what doesn't work for me as well, because as the facilitator of the educational process, you have to also be comfortable. You and your child have to be comfortable with this process. So The fact that there are a lot of resources is actually a good thing. It allows you to be able to find out what works best for you. So when you look at it from that side, no, it's not hard. It may take you some time to find what fits and what works, but that's not a difficulty. That's actually an opportunity to create the best educational environment for your child. Now, the last reason why people feel that homeschooling is hard to begin is really has to do with the process of beginning homeschooling sometimes. Now, this really more comes into play if you have a child who's already been in public school, and then or public or private, but in some sort of educational institution that's not homeschooling, and you're going to remove them from that current place where they are and then move them into homeschooling. Sometimes that can be seen as difficult because it's not just, today I don't feel like sending my child to school, I'm going to homeschool them, and then you just move on. And that's because there are state-by-state requirements for how the homeschooling process has to go. You've heard me mention many times now that in the state of Texas, it's really more of a relaxed environment for homeschooling, so there's just not a lot of red tape and paper that has to be done in order to homeschool your child in this state. There's some, but there's just not as much as in other states. But that's why it's important to know what your state requires. No, it is not hard. It's just a process, and you need to know what the process is. When you know the process, it's not difficult. You just follow what the process is. And you're also proactive, and then also continue to be interactive with your school district. If your state requires you to maintain contact with your school district, then you are the proactive party. You maintain that contact. Do not look at beginning homeschooling as a difficulty because of the fact that you may have some paperwork or things that need to be completed or information that needs to be submitted in order to do it. That's not a difficulty. That's the process. And so you just need to know what the process is and follow it, and then be responsible then for maintaining compliance and maintaining interaction where needed with your school district or local agencies. So that third reason being that there is a process is, a lot of times we want to just be able to do what we want to do, and we don't want to have a lot, of red tape that we have to go through or different things that we have to do. But if you are really desirous to have your child in a homeschooling environment, and you really want to do this for your child, then it's not difficult at all. It's just learning what the process is and then following that. And so it's important to be aware of what your state requires. And later on this week, we're going to talk some more about that, about what you need to be looking at to know what your state needs and where you need to go to find that information. So we're going to be going into that. So if your wheels are turning right now, don't worry, we're going to come back to that. So myth number 2, homeschooling is hard to begin. I think that we have discussed that in detail, and I think that we have shown that that is really not the case, that homeschooling isn't hard to begin. It's just we have to see ourselves as our child's first teacher and recognize that we already have that title, okay? And so all we have to do is then begin to function in that title. 2, we have to see the fact that having lots of resources isn't a bad thing. It's actually an opportunity to create the best educational environment for your child. And 3, that anything that we need to do to transition our child into homeschooling isn't a difficulty, it's the process. And when we learn what the process is, we're able to effectively facilitate that and to provide our child with the best environment possible. Okay, so I think we have knocked out myth number 2. I think we've thrown that one over the cliff too. So I ask you to join me tomorrow when we address the third myth, which is that homeschooling is the point of no return. Okay, so I look forward to talking with you tomorrow, and we're going to knock out myth number 3, and I hope you have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.